After 4 years, if you haven't figured out that Donald Trump is a narcissistic maniac who never does anything that doesn't ultimately benefit himself, I don't know what to tell you. If other people benefit from him getting his bottomless pit of an ego filled with attention and accolades, that is purely accidental. That is, after all, how he made a name for himself, manipulating the masses to love his larger-than-life personality without actually doing anything to earn that admiration other than being the rich guy who made up his own hype. Donald Trump is still that guy. Then there's this propensity that people in the U.S. have to approach politics from the perspective of whether they personally like someone or not. I feel like this is going to be a running theme in 2021, the need for Americans to stop looking at politicians as their favorite movie stars who they think they have some type of personal connection with. These personality traits we connect with these folks are fake. They're scripted. These people are playing a role, and that's exactly the same thing in politics. People excuse the bad policies and blatant disregard for human dignity that their favorite politicians commit solely because the other politicians are openly more callous about their hatred for us. They'll just come right out and say, well, we can't throw money at people. It makes them lazy, like, Rand Paul and his stupid and hateful rant. And in the middle of a pandemic, no less. But then the nice politicians that we like, they don't say that in public, but they'll agree with those cartoon villain politicians in these backdoor meetings so they can make a deal and claim some type of rhetorical bipartisanship prize for themselves. This is what happened with our COVID relief checks. Trump and his threat to veto the stimulus bill once again shows how he is honestly just better at this cutthroat game of politics than the Democrats are. Now understand, this is not me saying that he's sincere in what he's doing or that he actually cares about people. I already told you that he doesn't. That man does not care if you or I die in the middle of the street. He'd step over our corpses to get to whatever it is he wants. He said that at the beginning of his campaign, that he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose a follower. And I don't know why people still don't believe that he said what he meant and he meant what he said. What he wants to do with this announcement to veto this bill is to generate more support for him as he's leaving office, to keep his base firmly in his corner and maybe garner a little more support on his way out the door to be mobilized at a later date. Obviously, absolutely, to raise more money from those people to pay off his legal bills and to fund whatever it is he'll be up to in the next 4 years, during which he'll continue to be a constant and annoying fixture in politics. He's not going away. But what he's doing is also really effective at making the Democrats look really bad. And honestly, it shouldn't have been this easy to do, but it was, because the Democrats just made it this easy. People are misguidedly wondering why Trump all of a sudden made this demand for a larger relief payment. But if you'd been paying attention, you'd know that it wasn't actually an all of a sudden move. The New York Times revealed in their Hollywood script-like account of how the coronavirus relief bill came together that the Democrats had refused Trump's proposals for a larger relief payment in this COVID legislation to people several times. 20 paragraphs in, yes, I counted, that's when you learn the truth. Chuck Schumer said that Biden, quote, knew we could not get everything now, but anything we could get would make his job easier when he became president. Then he said, when the moderate Republicans introduced their plans, the top Democrats saw their opportunity. It was a major shift for the Democratic leaders who had rejected Trump administration proposals twice as large, refusing to budge as the election approached, even as they privately conceded that there was little momentum for a deal. Biden's transition team privately told Democrats that Congress needed to enact another stimulus plan to serve as a bridge until the new administration, even if it was much smaller than what ultimately would be needed. Now, to be fair, Trump's proposals included the absolutely evil liability protection legislation, so employees who became sick from coronavirus could not sue employers who didn't provide for their safety, which it doesn't seem Trump was going to budge on. So there goes any idea that he actually cares for people. But Democrats were absolutely offered more money from Trump for relief to people, and they refused repeatedly. Maybe because of a liability protection legislation, but largely because they didn't want to give Trump credit for anything going into the election. Could Trump have won the election with a $2,000 check in the mail to struggling people? I actually don't think so. I think, as my husband Abdul Shahid says, that Trump's response to the protests this summer and the stoking of the embers of white supremacy, along with his hateful response to the pandemic, was too much to overcome with one relief check bribe, which is exactly what this $2,000 check was and still is in Trump's mind. He thought it would win him the election, but for the Democrats, it was political calculus that they just couldn't work out how to mitigate the potential that his $2,000 gamble might work, even if the problem wasn't all that complicated to fix. And I believe that Trump thinks that threatening to veto this stimulus bill will work in his favor, either to challenge the election results at the last phase of the process, which is when Pence is supposed to read the Electoral College votes on, I believe, January 6th and certify Biden as the new president, or to propel him to future political aspirations. I'm not really sure which. I don't know if Trump can veto the bill. I don't know if there are enough votes to override his veto. I think there are. I don't know if the Democrats are going to amend it like he says, or go ahead with this insulting piece of crumbled up dollar bill that they threw on the ground and told us to be happy about because they won their bipartisan victory and the presidency. But I do know that this will be a disaster for the Democrats in 2022, when they will lose seats in midterm races to Trump candidates who absolutely will campaign on how Trump wanted to give people more money than the Democrats did and how the Democrats refused more than once. Trump outflanked the Democrats from the left, while the Democrats openly opposed and disparaged the actual left. And I can honestly say that they richly, richly deserve the losses that are coming up for them in 2022. Unfortunately, it's going to be painful for the rest of us. Follow Luke Mon Nation on patreon.com/Luke Mon Nation for lots of great content.